Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. And in high school, I was in a metal band, or so my friends and I told everybody. We didn't make any music, but we had the instruments, and it was close enough for us. Okay, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Raymond Hatfield, your host of the Beginner Photography Podcast, and I'm also an Indianapolis wedding photographer. I appreciate you coming here today to listen to this interview. It's a good one, and there's a lot of great, really actionable tips that you can put into practice that will help in either your photography or if you're looking to start doing more than just photography, like offering services as a photographer. You're going to get a lot out of this interview, so I'm really excited for you. But this week for me has been really crazy. I have a bit of an announcement. Okay, so this week has been just insane, and I'm not sure why, but if you're listening to this, either the day that it goes live or the week that it comes out, I'm either on my way to or I'm in Iceland right now, which I'm really excited about. But this week has been, as you can imagine, I mean, a trip going out of the country, packing is just insane, and airlines with international travel is not easy. You know, you really have to be a lot more mindful with the things that you take and don't take. So packing has taken way longer than it normally does for most of my trips. There's been a ton of weddings to edit, several wedding albums to create, send out, make revisions, and go on with that. It's time to start thinking for the future with like Thanksgiving, and I always brew an Almond Joy oatmeal stout for Thanksgiving, and I had to do that this week. I did that yesterday actually, and it was a terrible experience because for some reason we had a ton of bees like come out of nowhere. Like, we haven't really had a problem with bees, but all of a sudden after brewing yesterday, they must have smelled it, and they all came rushing over into my garage, and I had to fend them off. Anyway. On top of all that, I'm doing a complete overhaul on the 14-day video course that a lot of you have taken. The 14-day free video course on the website is designed to help you learn more about your camera and get the basics going so that you can move on, right? That you can build that solid foundation. And I'm revamping it. I'm condensing some videos. It's no longer going to be the 14 days. It's going to be much shorter. But I'm doing all that in preparation for this GoPro giveaway that I announced last week, right? Not to mention the rest of just everyday stuff, doctor's appointments, piano lessons, everything else. And this is what brings me to my next point. I put too much on my plate to tackle all at once, and that's always like a hard thing to realize. But I did. I definitely put too much on my plate to handle right now, and I'm not ashamed of that, because this happens. These sort of things happen. So I sat down and I had to ask myself, like, what can I not do? What shouldn't I do? What can't I do right now? And there were several things on that list, but about the podcast, for the podcast, I have to officially postpone the GoPro giveaway. I can't handle that right now with everything else that I have going on, from the ads that you have to produce, the blog posts, the video, promoting it. I have to face the fact that I just can't handle it all right now. So it's not done and gone forever. I promise you. I still have this thing. Check it out. If you're watching on YouTube, GoPro, it's right here. It's ready to go. It's ready to go in a box for one lucky winner. So just keep listening, and the GoPro giveaway will happen next month. Okay? But as for right now, I have to push it back. Otherwise, my brain will just literally explode right out of my head. And then that means no more podcasts. So nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But what I think is really interesting is that this trip coming up has taught me that I always put too much on my plate. I always do this, right? All the time. I'm always like more stressed out than I should be because I'm trying to do everything all at once. This week I thought, oh, you know what I should do? A chat bot on my website. I got to learn how to code a chat bot. Like, these are just crazy things, right? That are a huge time investment that I think are just really easy. So I just go ahead and try to do them. And then once again, I just completely overload myself. But what this trip has taught me is that I just do this to myself all the time. But because the trip has hard dates, right? And I can't just like, actually, maybe we'll go tomorrow. Maybe we'll push this trip back out of the country 2 or 3 days so that I can get some work done. It's that my work has to fit into my life. And I think sometimes, like as a photographer, you think, or at least before you maybe go full time, you think like, oh, photography is my life. It's everything that I want to do. I want to do it all the time, and that's fine. That's fine. But there still has to be like some boundaries when it comes to the business side of things. So like this week, I don't even think that I picked up my camera. I mean, I had a wedding last weekend, but I don't think that I picked up my camera anytime this week, and yet I've been like nonstop busy, and it's with everything that's related after the fact. So again, I'm just getting ahead of myself. If you're listening to this the week that it comes out, like I said earlier, I'm currently in Iceland. So if you're not already, I want to invite you to come join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, because I'm sure to share some photos of my adventures there. So if you want to join, just search Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group to join. Okay, I'm leaving that at that because today's interview is another in-depth interview, and one that you are going to learn a ton about from the world of child and family photography. And if you are a premium member, you're going to hear more than 30 minutes of additional questions where Hannah, today's guest, answered questions about how to book your first family session, how she took an entire year off of photographing, and it actually made her a better business owner, how she did that, and even the legalities of working with kids. So that's all that I got. Without any more, we're just going to get into today's interview with Hannah Marie. Today's guest is a family and child portrait photographer from our neighbor to the north, Canada, whose clients say amazing things like, she's a true artist with a gift, and her photos convey real, raw, and intimate emotions. They will forever remind me of the special time in my life. Today, what an incredible review that is. Today, I'm really excited to chat with her and discover how she can deliver such powerful images. Today, I'm chatting with Hannah Marie. Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Raymond. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I start off kind of every interview like this. I love the interview, or not the interview, the introduction. It's always so like big and grand, and it really gets me fired up. But I know from personal experience that you don't get to that point overnight. It has to start from somewhere. So the first question that I always ask is, how did you get your start in photography?
It's a very good question. I was probably like 24, 25 and accepted a job at a summer camp. Summer resort, basically, for like the richest kids in the world. They fly in and they have like a helicopter landing pad.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had a job there as a wakeboard instructor, injured my ankle, and switched over to photography.
For the camp?
Yeah, like instructing photography and stuff for the kids.
Gotcha.
Because I had studied art in school. I knew enough about like composition and stuff like that. And then I also had to teach Photoshop. So some of the kids would come in and be like, you should show them how to do this. And I'm like, oh, do you remember how to do it from last year? Why don't you show them? And then I'd like watch over their shoulders. So that was really the beginning. And the CEO owned like thousands of dollars worth of Canon gear. So that gave me access to that throughout the whole summer. And I shot like fundraising events for the camp that are like 15 couples, they raised $30,000 kind of nights, like very wealthy community. Mm-hmm. So they look like little mini weddings in the portfolio. I did family portraits for the full-time staff, photographing kids all afternoon, doing all sorts of different things. So really my start was in like photographing children. And then the CEO would actually lend me his gear during the year because he never used it. Like he's not a photographer. So if I ever had a job that I was interested in doing, he would let me borrow his stuff.
Oh, how great.
And so that was really interesting. And then I did a small business course for years or 8 months, sponsored by our government, actually. And the whole idea was that they would give us funding for those 8 months. Half of it was in class, half of it was out launching. And by the end of it, you were supposed to have a fully functioning business with a full business plan behind you.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really cool. Unfortunately, the funding was cut. That was the last year that they offered it, but it was brilliant. And that gave me like the business sense. And midway through that, I was like, I guess I should buy my own gear. Like if I'm opening a photography studio, I should probably own a camera. And then within the same program, I also launched a wedding coordinating company, knowing that one would win out over the other because they're both kind of seasonal. In Canada, our main wedding season is obviously spring, summer, fall, and the same for family portraits. So that first year that I launched, I mainly did wedding coordinating, but I would keep my gear on me so that while I was coordinating these weddings, I would have photos for my portfolio for wedding coordinating. And then I just put those on my wedding photography website too.
Smart.
And so by that next season, I had 9 weddings booked for shooting and none coordinating. So I don't necessarily recommend doing it that way because I had no experience shooting a wedding. The only way I went into it confidently is that I had second shooters who I had confidence in, and I never needed to fall back on that. But it was just that guarantee of like, if I totally screw this up for the first couple of weddings, like I know that I'm not going to disappoint the bride and groom. That was my main goal, is to not disappoint them. So that's how I got started. And I remember my very first newborn shoot was right when I launched my photography company in that first summer. And it was like a preemie. He looked like a tiny little, like the diapers were like this big. Oh. And I was so proud of those pictures. And I put them in my portfolio on Flickr. And Flickr, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. And totally forgot about it. And then I happened upon this account like 4 or 5 years ago and saw the pictures, and they're just mortifying. It's like literally I'm zoomed, focused on the little butthole when it's supposed to be like a cute bum picture. It's just like terrible. So yeah, I've definitely hopefully grown since then.
Humble beginnings. I get it. I get it. That's too funny. You mentioned there that you had a little bit of an art background, knowledge about composition and stuff. But when you picked up that camera, I kind of want to know, what was the hardest part about the photography side for you to grasp?
That's a good question. I think honestly the workflow after the fact. I like the first couple of weddings I edited in like Picasa or something like that, right? Like it's terrible. And I was doing like 1,200 pictures in like Picasa.
Wow.
But I mean, I was charging like very beginner rates, right?
Yeah.
So
you got to start.
I've just always had that, like, I'm going to get it done however I know how. So I'd say like that post processing and like that client experience was the most difficult to learn. But in terms of actually shooting, I mean, I think that I could have grown a lot faster if I had a coach or a mentor or had gone to conferences. I didn't even go to my very first conference until 2015, I want to say.
Do you remember what it was? What the conference was? It was
Shutterfest. Definitely. The other ones seemed very big and almost intimidating to go to alone. And I had reached out to some local photographers previously and said like, hey, would you like to go to WPPI with me this year? And they were like, oh yeah, my husband and I are going. Like, we'd love to meet up with you while we're there. And I'm like, no, I'm like looking for a roommate. But most of the photographers in my city are married, like married couple photographers. So I could never really find, and I didn't search all that hard, but I just didn't really ever go to those. And then Shutterfest was so small and within driving distance. I mean, it's like a, I don't know, 12-hour drive. But my husband, like, we do a lot of traveling. So that's just like, if I can get there in a day, I'm fine.
Yeah. I'm interested to know if there are any conferences that you would recommend newer photographers going to today.
Definitely. So Shutterfest by far. primarily because it's very hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phenomenal community. The Facebook group is insanely encouraging. All of the instructors are in there. Like, if you have a question, we'll chime in if we see it. Especially, like, I went there for the first time not knowing anybody, and left with like what I felt like a community of friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
And even like family. Like, I'm not speaking there this year. I'm taking a whole year off from speaking. I'm not traveling at all for work this year, but like this coming speaker season. But like, the speaker list was just released yesterday, and I'm just like feeling like, oh,
I wish I would have done this for so many great people.
Miss out. But I feel like that with every conference.
Sure.
But for the very beginning ones, I think Shutterfest is definitely hitting that level of a lot of beginner education. And it's very, very financially friendly. I think it's like $99.
Okay.
So
great tip.
yeah, it's very accessible. That was the other thing. I could drive there. It was a low entry point financially, and I could find a roommate. So
you know what? I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I've never been to a photography convention either. Never.
Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's one of those like what do they call it? Humble excuses, where it's like, well, I got 2 kids at home, my wife works nights, and like, there's no way that I could get to something like that. But after hearing your review of what it's done for you personally and professionally, I think I might have to make it a priority for sure. That sounds great.
Yeah. And in fact, like, even once I got like, so after that happens in April or sometimes late March, like the week right after Easter every year. And then, well, oddly enough, my next big thing was speaking on Creative Live that fall. Like, I went into this industry like not knowing anybody, and like within 5 months was on Creative Live. It's kind of going backwards the way that most people do it. And then I went to WPPI, or no, Imaging came first that next January. And of course, it was like the Shutterfest people that I saw there that I was like, okay, I know you guys. I'm going to hang out with you.
Yeah.
And then that's how I made all my connections like outside of Shutterfest and met all sorts of people. So it was amazing. Yeah.
That's so exciting. Now you got me excited to look into something like that. And Shutterfest is not, I think it's only 4 hours from me. It's not very far. We got Jason in the group from St. Louis, so it's not far for him. Maybe I could just crash on his couch. I'll have to see if that's okay with his family.
And they're always looking for family models. So get your wife to take some time off work. Get your kids to model. Have lots of beautiful pictures of them.
That is a great idea. That's great. Now, I should absolutely look into that. That's hilarious. Yeah. So you said that one of the first things that you started shooting was children. Now you focus a lot on children and families as well. I want to know that in your own words, what would you say that the job description of a child or portrait photographer is?
Well, it's funny because this past month I've been doing these interviews with the local political candidates. We have an election going on, and partially as a marketing strategy for myself, but I start each one saying an introduction to myself, and I say, I'm passionate about connecting with people, telling their stories, and educating others. So within the photography industry, I do that through connecting with kids. Like, it's my job to connect with that child and build that relationship really quickly, and maybe also with the family, and then tell the story of where they're at. Like, I love the idea of bringing a little boy in, particularly boys, because it's such like a pivotal moment in their lives, at least the ones that I know, right before their very first haircut. Because literally they go from like your little baby boy to a little boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, do you have a little boy?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Did you experience that? It's just so weird, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how many people don't even think to capture that, like that pivotal transition in their lives?
At least one right here.
Yeah. And I love, like, so just even planting that idea in a parent's mind, and they're like, oh, I definitely want to do that. Or when your little girl has like her front teeth missing, or any of that. So it's my job to tell that story of the family. And if you go to my family portrait website, it says, we are the storytellers, photographing children for the loveliest of families worldwide, because I want to plant that in their mind. Like, I'm not just coming to take snapshots of your family at the park. I'm coming to tell this story of your family over the years. And also using that language, you hear storyteller and you think of a book, right? And so instantly, without even saying, I want to sell you an album, they're thinking, I want an album of my story that she's telling me. So that's what I see my job as a storyteller for these families.
So being part of a storyteller, it can be a small portion of a photographer, right? Being able to tell the story, you do that through your photographs.
Definitely.
But when you photograph children, I want to know, what is it that you're trying to get, right? Like, you're trying to tell that story, but is it a certain shot? Is it just a personality? What is it that you're trying to achieve?
Definitely personality. I want it to be showing like, so this is how I do this. I shoot best when it's just me and that kid in the room. If the parents are there, they kind of distract from it. I'm just going through my cards right now to show you some pictures. But like this little one, like she just has that kind of sass in her look.
It's in the
but
hair.
It's super elegant. Like she loves having like her hair and makeup done. This little kid, that was how she was convinced to come for pictures, was like, we'll do your hair and makeup, we'll do your nails, but if we do that, you have to let us take your picture too. And she's like, okay. This is her as well. So again, a different personality side of hers, but still that like
more childish,
engaging. Yeah. And in the studio look, all of the focus is on the kids. It's not on the background of the park. It's not like any of that. It's just drawing out their personality. This little guy,
I love that.
Capturing that like wonder in his eyes. And actually all three, I just opened my studio a year ago, January. All three of these were taken in my living room right here, like in this room.
Wow.
With natural light. So this isn't like you need thousands of dollars of lighting gear. You don't need anything fancy. It's in front of my painted wall, all three of them. Same with this one.
So when you're taking those photos, that's great. That's a beautiful shot. I know all those are on your website and they look incredible. So if anybody's listening right now, that's such a great idea. If anybody's listening right now, I'll put links in the show notes. You can, if you're in a podcast app, you can just scroll down and you should see the show notes. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but the link will be there and you can check out those photos for sure. So you meet with these kids, right? They come into the studio. How much prep work is done before to get information about their personality versus, I guess, when they show up? What's your process on that?
Yeah, I mean, I am shifting that because I can no longer book out in advance as far, but typically like it's fun to try to build a connection with them and maybe send a letter in the mail and like be their pen pal buddy to build that relationship. But also, before I even started that strategy, they would just come. I would ask the parents, like, how old are they? What are their favorite shows? Like, if I need to be able to draw them out of their shell more, I want to be able to say, like, talk about Dora or whatever it is that is their very favorite. But it was interesting because I've only made the shift to children photography as a specialty about 2 or 3 years ago. Prior to that, I was mainly focusing on weddings because I thought I've worked in the wedding industry for so long. Through school, I sold wedding gowns. I had been a wedding coordinator. Like it was just everything was pointing towards weddings. And then I realized, well, actually, I've worked with kids most of my life. So I might have 10 years of experience in weddings and 8 years shooting them, but I have literally like 30 years of experience working with kids. And I realized like that's where my passion is. Like I can connect with them so quickly. So it isn't even necessarily doing things in prep ahead of time. Like you can do as much as you want ahead of time, but being present and speaking to them and making eye contact and like noticing what they're excited about. The picture of the little boy with that look of wonder, like I said, it was in my living room and he was like so distracted by the blinds that I couldn't get his attention. So I just grabbed the string of the blind, pulled it behind him so it wasn't in front of his face, and just like pulled on it to get the blinds up. And like, I think that was with my left hand and like shot that look. He just like was shocked that it moved and shot that. So just working with what they're interested in. Like I had spent probably like 4 minutes trying to get him to not pay attention to that. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to give in and like use what he's paying attention to get a reaction out of him. So a lot of it is about just being present with them and understanding what they're interested in.
Hey, Raymond here. And if you're listening to this, it means that you are listening to the free version of today's podcast, which means that you are missing out big time. You know, if you become a premium member, not only do you unlock the full interview with today's guests, where they share so much more valuable information on how to become a successful photographer, but you also get access to the entire back catalog of past interviews with some of the world's most renowned and experienced photographers, who open up and share how they got to where they are and what they would do if they had to start all over again today. Now, if you want to find out, become a premium member by heading over to patreon.com/beginner photography podcast, or just head on over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link on our homepage. That's it. I hope to see you there. For for new photographers, you are obviously an educator for photographers. Even if it's more for established photographers, I want to know if there's any bad information that you hear that keeps being taught to photographers that you think that maybe they should just ignore.
Honestly, like, there's so many ways to be successful.
Yeah.
Like,
is that the bad information?
Well, I think the bad information is like hearing people bash other photographers who are successful.
Oh, I see.
It's like, I teach IPS and product sales, and I've found like my jive there, but there are other photographers who are super successful who don't do any product.
Yeah.
So like, to go into it with the mentality that like I have to do it the way that they're doing it. Or I have to do, like, I was chatting with somebody the other day, and she was asking like all about families and children's photography. And then she made a comment like, I just hate working with kids. And I said, so why are you wanting to offer this? And she said, well, I was told to diversify. Like, I'm shooting weddings, and I was told that I should be shooting other stuff. And I was like, why? Like, do what you love. Like, figure out what you want to shoot and what you love and the business structure that you love, and then do it. So, as much as I love working with kids and doing the product stuff, I launched KW Headshots back in the spring, and I'm loving that. Like, I love that it's like they call, I book them in, they come in, I proof with them that day, and by the time they get home, they have their pictures done.
Yeah.
Like, wow. I love that.
Yeah.
And I can't do that with families because it's product. So I'm almost on the verge of like, how much energy do I want to put into my kids and families? Like, maybe I want to focus all on headshots, and to give yourself permission to evolve through the years. And when I got into educating, I was known as a wedding photographer, and now I'm known for children. And maybe in 3 years, I'll be known for headshots. Like, allow yourself to just grow and do what you love.
I think hearing your journey is really going to speak to a lot of people, and hearing what you said there, that there's more than just one path of success. And I know that that alone, there's more than one path to success, is the reason why I really wanted to start this podcast, because I knew that. I just didn't have the proof to back it up. And having these, having on world-class photographers come onto the podcast and chat to me about their success just proves it even more. And I mean, listeners can go back and hear so many interviews of people who worked hard for 20 years until something picked up and then it became successful, or they've just defined their own version of success, and I thank you for sharing that, because that I think it gets lost a lot for beginners, and just hearing that is really going to help them out. When it comes to the side of like actual photography, the actual photos, is there anything that you see as like a sign of just like a total amateur photographer when it comes to photographing either kids or families? Does that little laugh mean that there's a lot of things?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who like, oh, you're a photographer? Me too. And then they show me their pictures and they're asking me what I think. And I'm like, do you want me to be honest?
I see.
I mean, like cutting off limbs, cutting off toes, cutting off at like your knees or your hips. Like, there's just some areas that you don't want to chop people off in the frame. But so many I see, and it's like a stunning image, and then like their feet are cut off at the ankles. And it's like, why? Like, just zoom out that slightest little bit.
Yeah.
Probably like poor lighting. It might be a great facial expression, but the lighting is off, or a mixed of lighting. Like, right now, I'm guessing that you have window light and a light on somewhere else.
No, I have two little like garage clamp lights that are right in front of my computer, and then my window is closed right there, and then just the. But anyway, that's kind of what I modeled
Yeah.
it on, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Because just seeing like yellow light from one side and blue light from another, or
Yeah,
things like that. Not paying attention to the lighting. Because really, as photographers, like that's what we're capturing. We're capturing the
just light.
light. And that's the difference between like a stunning image and one that's really cool, but not quite there. And I will say for clients, they can tell the difference between a bad photograph and a good one. Clients cannot tell the difference between a good one and an excellent one.
That's a great distinction.
Yeah. And we can be so hard on ourselves. And sometimes I'm like, am I really the person they want to hire for their headshots? But like, like, no matter where you get, you're always going to be critical of your own work, and that's what makes you grow. But yeah, like your clients don't know the difference between good and excellent. They just know the difference between bad and good. And really, the best thing that you can do to build your business is reply like as quickly as you humanly can for every email, because a lot of artists don't do that. And that's where the frustration comes in. Going back to the photographers we heard about, that sometimes are in the media for being called frauds or
Sure.
whatever. Imagine if they just emailed their clients and said straight off the bat, like, hey, I had intended to have it done by this time. For whatever reason, I'm not going to have it for another 4 months. I'm so sorry. Here's what I can do to make this up to you. That would be all they need. They just need to know what to expect. So I know that's kind of off target from what you were asking, but I think that people need to hear that. Like, the best thing you can do for your business is just communicate with people. But I think like the poor lighting and cutting off at the wrong places is like a sure tell.
Sure.
Or, I mean, like the picture that I took of the little kid, they were literally on a dining room table with like a blanket under them. And I wanted like that cute butt shot, but the kid like stuck his legs out and he was just kind of like sprawled out on the table, and I was focused literally on the butthole.
On just the butt. Yeah.
So just focusing on like what you want to be in focus. If their face is in focus, it should be the eyes. Or if their face is in the photo, it should be their eyes. Like,
right.
if it's a picture of the butt, don't go for the butthole. don't like go
Just
to
don't
a
show
different
buttholes.
Yeah, don't do that.
We're not in the business of showing buttholes. I got it.
Have you said butthole this many times on a podcast?
I'd have to ask the listeners, but I'm pretty confident the answer is no. Pretty confident the answer is no. This is definitely going to go down in the history books for sure. If I want to know if you had to start over again today, right? You were wakeboarding, you broke your leg, you were given that camera. Mm-hmm. What would you do to get to where you are today, but faster?
Faster. I would hire a coach.
Hire a
Hands
coach.
down. Hands down. Or
Okay,
like
so then real quick follow-up question. What, as somebody who is where you are today, what is it that you would hope to get most out of that coach?
Well, I mean, they could have told me how terrible that picture was.
Okay, so just honest feedback.
Yeah. Critiquing your work, explaining why. Like, how can I make this specific kind of a shoot more improved? You can also get that feedback at print competition. That's the other thing I would do. But in terms of refining my business and understanding how to run it, a personal like one-on-one business coach can come in and hear like, I do coaching and I don't push my business structure on other people. I say, because I've done the digital and I've done product.
Yes.
I've done the transition. So if people want to transition to it, I can do that. But I actually first ask them, like, what is your end goal in life? Like, what do you want your day-to-day life to look like? Because you could take me, and when I was a wedding photographer, I charged higher prices, but only accepted maybe 15 a year. You look at Michael Anthony, and I think he's pushing out he still
70.
had 50 weddings between now and December.
Tons.
Right? Like, I have no interest in that at all.
Same
like none. But he loves it. Like, he thrives on that. And so to just sit down and have that conversation about what do you want your business to look like ideally? What do you want your life to look like? And design a business that actually complements that. Because I think when you can design a business that complements that, you're going to love it and you're going to have more of a piece about you, and your clients will see that and be drawn to that. So just have a sense of that. And a coach can help you figure that out, or even help you see, like, I've had my coaching clients, like, I'll look at their pictures, like I mentioned, and see like their children's portraits are so engaging and their wedding ones just totally fall flat. Right. And having someone experienced give them permission to say, like, just focus on this. Like, this is where you want your attention to be.
That's important, because everybody hears, oh, well, you got to diversify. So people think that they have to. I love that.
And even right now, like, I realized in terms of marketing, what I want to be marketing right now, like, I was in weddings for so long that I realized I needed to, I just heard something really weird. Sorry. That's fine. I realized that I needed to relearn how to market to a new clientele, because I don't have the wedding people coming in every year and then naturally coming in as family portraits now. Yeah. So now I have a business coach for marketing. You know, like,
is it somebody who focuses on photography marketing, or just marketing in general? Yeah. Photography marketing.
A photographer. Yeah. A good friend of mine.
That is so cool.
She's like the queen of marketing. And I'm like, I need to.
Do you want to share who it is, or is that someone who you're
holding on to? Yeah, Megan DePiro. Oh, she's awesome.
I just had her on the podcast
I love her.
3 weeks ago. Yeah.
She's brilliant. I'm just like, I need more of your knowledge.
Yeah.
So she does, I'm not doing it one-on-one. I'm doing it as like a marketing mastermind. Uh-huh. So there's 5 of us. 6 including her and her husband, or no, maybe 7 including them. And we just meet twice a month online, and she gives us like homework. And I love that. Like, I can give myself like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I need that person like following up with me, like on my butt. Like, did you do this? So actually September was like a networking month for us, and I pretty much killed it.
Yeah, I was going to say, here you are getting thousands of views on your local. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Hannah, I've asked you so many questions today, and you have shared your heart out today, and everything that you shared was absolutely incredible. Is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you want to make sure that the listeners know and understand?
Yeah, actually, so I have 2 things. Speaking specifically to very beginners and people who might not have a big business organization set up yet in terms of the business side, something like 17 Hats, something that you can plug into early on. It has such a low entry point, and being organized from day one will really help you to maintain that throughout. It also helps you with communication because, like I said, the more clearly you communicate with people, the better they feel. And a lot of my emails, once they're already booked, are automated to go out, and the quote is as well. So something like that, that's something that I wish existed back when I started, because I totally have this like file in my office of like papers that I can go through for contracts and whatever. It's crazy.
I got this one. It's ridiculous. It's like, why do I even have these?
And it's such like, I used to email them to them. They'd have to print it out and fill it out and mail it back. It's like, like, I'll give you 14 days to return this. Otherwise I'll release your date. Now it's like, you have 24 hours to return this. Yeah. Otherwise I'll release your date. Like, don't hold dates without money. No questions asked.
Great.
Like,
yeah,
contract
that's going to be
and
a
money.
memorable quote for this episode.
Yeah. And the second thing is, when you are ready to have a website, like, again, consider hiring someone who knows what they're doing. So one of the things that I offer in my coaching is what I call my website collaboration. So I use Show It. We get a template that already exists, and I've already like chatted with the people about the brand that they want to portray, whether it's like fun and funky or classic and timeless. And I have a pretty good sense of their templates, and I can just pull up the ones that I think are ideal, and we'll choose one of those. And in 8 hours total, we can have a full website up and going. And that's over like either 2 hours a week for a month, or 2 hours Tuesday, 2 hours Thursday for 2 weeks in a row, and it's done. And so what I help them with that is, you could easily go to Show It on your own, but people way over talk on their websites.
Yeah.
And the more words that are there, the less people read. And most of the time it's like telling you about yourself or telling your client about yourself. But that's kind of like going to a networking thing and somebody saying like, what do you do? Tell me about your business. And then you just talk about yourself the whole time.
The whole time, yeah. Nobody wants to be that guy.
And it's like, I've won these awards, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I was published here, and they're just like glazing over. It's the same with our websites. Like, we need to make them about the client. So I think newer photographers getting established, having a really beautiful website that speaks to the heart of their client. You have to understand who the client is and how to speak to them, and have that to engage them. Because if you don't have that, even if people like your pictures, they might be less likely to contact you because you're coming across as less professional.
Right.
So, so have a great website that connects with your client. And if you want to do it in 8 hours, I can help you with it.
And have a CRM like 17 Hats, which I personally use, and I don't use nearly to its full potential. And Hannah, like I said before we even got on this call, I'm definitely gonna reach out and get some help, just kind of putting everything together, because like you said, there is so many things that within 17 Hats, it'd be nice to actually utilize them all and help run my own business more efficiently and automate more things. So that's great.
Definitely. So for those who didn't hear that conversation, I also have what I call like a 17 Hats Kickstarter or a boot camp, and that's also 8 hours, just to help you like get that foundation going, because it can be a little overwhelming.
And that's the reason why I need help. Yeah, absolutely. Hannah, you've shared a bunch. You gave extra tips. How can the listeners find you online?
Yeah, well, my education website is education.hannahmarie.ca, and you'll link to that. On Facebook, I have the portrait community. So if you're a portrait photographer or even engagement portraits, anything like that, you can find me. Just look up facebook.com/group/the portrait community, or just search it on Facebook. And I do live interviews there with different photographers in the community every month. Last month, we were talking about mental health. And Instagram, I'm at Hannah Marie Photographer. So
perfect. Well, Hannah, like you said, I will absolutely link to everything in the show notes so that the listeners can find you. Again, I thank you so much for coming on, as we went way over the scheduled 45 minutes. But again, I truly appreciate everything, and it was just great chatting to you.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Hannah shared so many actionable tips in today's episode. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's truly an episode that I know that you can listen to, even if you're not, a child or family photographer, and pick something up and implement it into your photography. And even if you don't have a business and you just kind of like take photos of like family and friends, you can still have business cards, right? And one thing that I wanted to bring attention to was that in the interview, obviously I'm engaging in a video interview with her. And if you're watching on YouTube, you saw it. But if you're listening, when she was talking about the photos of the kids that she was showing, a little girl and a boy looking with wonderment, the photos that she was holding up was actually her business card. And watching it, I just thought, I saw it in action. I was like, oh, this is so smart. Is that what she does is that she prints up her business cards, and on one side it's her business card, and on the other side she has several different photos, right? So each card only has one photo on the back, but it means that one photo could have that photo of a young boy printed on it. The other photo could have a maternity photo on it, a headshot on another business card, and then maybe a family portrait on another. So you could custom tailor the cards that you give away to your clients, right? You're not going to give a card with a maternity photo on it to a mom with young kids. If she's already given birth, she doesn't care about the maternity photo. She wants to see the portraits of the young kids, and that is so smart. And this is something that you can do. It's something that I could do. I could do one with a portrait, do one with like a bridal portrait, a headshot, not a headshot, like a landscape, engagement photos. I could do that as well, and I probably should be. But you could do this. And I didn't ask her in the interview who she goes through, but I'm assuming that it is Moo. So if you're interested in creating business cards like this, you can just check out moo.com. I know that they do that, so definitely check that out. Hannah, if you're listening, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I am definitely going to have you back on. I feel like we just kind of broke the ice here, and there was so much in this interview that I wanted to just go deeper upon, but obviously our time is limited. So again, Hannah, thank you so much for everything. Okay, that is it for this week. Again, if you are not in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, I would love to have you. Honestly, it's a safe place to go share your photos and just ask any questions that you have about photography. So if you're interested, just search Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group or something like that to join today. Okay, until next week, get out there, shoot something new, challenge yourself, but most importantly, stay safe, all right? No photo is worth your life. That's it. Okay, I will see you again next week. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.